Professor Dinesh Singh, Chancellor KR Mangalam University, esteemed faculty members of KR Mangalam University, students and their parents of the university, other members of the staff of KR Mangalam University, ladies and gentlemen. At the onset, let me really thank Professor Dinesh Singh for inviting me on the fourth virtual convocation of KR Mangalam University. It's indeed a pleasure to be part of this young university, and what I have noticed is that in that short period, the university has achieved a lot, going right from the grassroots level, where they're looking at how they could promote things in rural India, from legal aid to looking at smart ashram projects, to the other end of the spectrum, where they're looking at robotics, artificial intelligence, and see how they can collaborate with hospitals and international universities so that there can be a holistic development as far as students' career and progress is concerned. So thank you very much for inviting me for this virtual convocation. It's indeed a pleasure. The last 2 years have been very challenging for all of us. The pandemic has really caused huge havoc in all aspects of life, our personal life, health, education. The social fabric has been stretched, and also it has affected the economy, travel, tourism, you name it, and the pandemic has had an effect on that, in that area. Therefore, I think it's important for us to look at it from the education point of view and how it has affected us as far as education in universities is concerned, and how we can reimagine a post-COVID higher education. Once the pandemic stuck and we had this lockdown, there was a huge change in the form of education and the way we were imparting education as far as universities, schools were concerned. And I think we dwelt into what was known as emergency remote teaching. From face-to-face teaching, we went on to this emergency remote teaching. And this is different from online learning, which is already there in various universities in terms of online module. But emergency remote teaching was something that meant that you had to quickly convert what you were doing face-to-face in classrooms to an online module. And it becomes very challenging for certain specialities or certain areas where you have practicals, where there is a need for students to really be present physically, and that can be in science, it can be in arts. And this became a huge challenge both for teachers and for the students. And I think this was something that we all faced, whether it be undergraduate medical students, postgraduate medical students, students in any university globally had to suddenly face this challenge of how do we now move on to emergency remote teaching. This had a major effect on teachers. Many of teachers had to become savvy in terms of various platforms. It could be Zoom, it could be so many other platforms. I didn't know there were so many platforms that existed when we started on this remote teaching and webinars. Similarly, challenge was there for students. How do they now adapt to this new way of learning? And this did have effect as far as academic performance was concerned. It meant they had to become digitally savvy, and it also had an effect in terms of the psychological and emotional stress that students faced. They had features of boredom, they had features of loneliness, there was also features of frustration and anger, and all of this really threw up a huge challenge in the education sector. As we move forward, keeping all of this in mind, we really need to see what is the future and how can we look at the future keeping technology in mind. I think there is now a need for us to look at how we can look at higher education or education in general in the post-COVID era, or the new normal that we will have for the coming years. And I think there will be new teaching modules which will come up. We will have to train teachers in developing new modules which could look at a lot of technology. We have looked at simulations, we have looked at virtual reality, artificial intelligence. How can that become part of the teaching so that we can make it more and more useful? And I'm sure that A lot of institutes are already looking at that. We will also have to rethink the way that we are teaching. Classically, and since I've been involved in teaching for almost 40 years, a classical teaching pattern is a one-person teaching model. I have to take a class, I would go. In the olden times, it would be a blackboard teaching. It moved on to overhead projections, and then, of course, to PowerPoint projections. And I would make the slides, and I would give a talk. I would have an interactive session with the students, and then answer questions. And then that would be a one-person teaching module. But I think now we need to look at a teamwork teaching model, which could be useful as we move on to the online mode. How can we involve teachers in a way that there is more interaction, there is more involvement of students and teachers, and knowledge can be imparted in a much better manner. As we move forward, I think it's important, and I think this becomes even more important now in the post-COVID era, that we should not forget the social dimension. Education has to be there with equity, with diversity. It should also address local needs, national needs, and keep in mind cultural issues. And that is something that we will have to look at both in terms of universities, in terms of colleges. How do we develop the new education programs which have the social dimension, keeping in mind the new normal? It could be just studying condition. We take for granted that you can have an online class and a student can log in. But where is the student situated? He could be in a house which has only 2 rooms, and he cannot, the environment in that room may not be conducive for him to really be there for online education. There may be a lot of noise in the background, a lot of people there, and he cannot focus on teaching. But that is something we really not looked at. The internet connection or the distraction which may be there. So I think there is a need for us now to start looking at it in a more holistic manner as we move forward. And I think universities have to start looking at a flexible program of design and delivery as they move forward. As we move into the new era, so-called the 4th industrial revolution, a lot of new technologies will come into our life. Many of them are already there. We have a lot of artificial intelligence, whether it be the Alexa in our house or the various programs that we use. A lot of them use artificial intelligence. So does our smartphone. But we also will have various other technologies coming in, robotics, the Internet of Things, big data analysis. As we start teaching, we have to see how we can incorporate all of this into our teaching modules for the future. How can we break silos and have interdisciplinary interaction? Because that is how science is progressing, how medicine is progressing, how various fields are progressing. There is now a need for scientists to talk to mathematicians, to talk to physicians, to talk to computer experts, to talk to people with humanities, and be able to develop programs which encompass all of this, because this is how things are going to move forward and what the future is going to be. So this is a challenging time that we're all living through. It's become more challenging because of the pandemic, but I'm sure that universities like the KR Mangalam University will address these issues and move forward, keeping all these challenges in mind. And I see that they have already doing that in various programs that they have started, whether it be robotic activities or other activities that are there in terms of the internship or agreements with IBM and other institutes, academic industry linkages which they have already started. This is the way forward, and I congratulate the university for all these activities. I'm sure the students here have had a very fruitful tenure, and they will learn a lot. But learning is something that people have to do throughout their life. And I would say this is just a stepping stone for as you move forward. So whatever you've learned here may not be very relevant as you move forward. But whatever you've learned will help in developing strategies of how you can develop new areas of interest, interact with people, and broaden your horizon. So I'd like to take this opportunity to wish the students of KR Mangalam University the very best. I'm sure they have a bright future, and I'd like to congratulate the university on its fourth convocation. Thank you very much.